This is awkward.
Yes, sir. Reading you loud and clear. The clock has started.
The clock has started.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome to Pressing for Flight, live from the Space Coast, where the schedule never holds.
Clock has started.
Kegel didn't turn his he didn't mute his stream. He's watching the chat, y'all. So if you're in the chat, now you know Kegel is watching it. How you doing, buddy? Keegs.
I'm doing great.
How you doing
Long
there?
day at work. I'm just glad to be home.
Matt Cutshaw, founder of Next Horizons.
Doing great, man.
And
Chilling.
I got the shirt on.
He's got oh shit.
Oh, look at
Yeah,
Keegs.
nice. And the newest member to the Next Horizons team, our guest tonight, Matthew Jordan.
What's up, guys?
Delayed applause.
Our audience is slow. Yeah, we just got Matthew in the. Should I be calling you Matthew or Matt?
It doesn't matter to me, man.
All right, so Matt is easier because it's the Matt, Steve, and Steve show today.
Steve, do Matt.
Becca's gone again because she's a working girl. Not that kind of working girl, but she manages. She's a manager, and she has sometimes, you got to cover the shifts. So she's not here with us tonight. But we do have Matt Jordan, and he's the newest writer, really the only writer. Let's be honest. Like before Matt, we're like, yeah, we're pumping out articles, once a week, maybe just like the most interesting stuff to us. And hey, Harry Stranger in the chat.
Yep. Hey, Harry.
And now it's like articles galore. It's like man, like. Because we're all into this stuff, but none of us are like great writers, I mean,
Yeah.
I've done my best, to try to put stuff out there and and not have too many grammatical errors. But so how is it that you're able to write? Explain to us how is it that you're able to just pound this stuff out? Because you're like, one day you'll just be like, I'm going to do the thing on the in-flight abort test and run on the Roscosmos, and then I'm going to do one on Starliner. And then it's like bam, 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 it's out.
Yeah, man. Well, I got my master's in space science from American Military University. It's an all-online school.
Mm-hmm.
So by doing that, I was having to write a lot of articles and chat articles and quite a few term papers and a thesis at the end. So I got really into doing a lot of the writing. So for some reason, I don't know, it's like a switch gets flipped and here come the articles.
Yeah. And you particularly like writing about space, I'm assuming.
Oh, yes. Even when I was getting my bachelor's is in history, but in writing about history, I always thought, how can I relate this back to space? And since I was in 19th and 20th century American history, I wrote a lot about the space race. And in writing about the space race, I knew that's what I loved, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So after I finished the bachelor's, I jumped right into the master's, man.
Well, I forgot one thing that I usually try to do with all the guests is ask them, why space? Why is space the thing for you? Like, what got you into it?
For me, what got me into it was that, second grade, most Floridian kids, they'll remember second grade, you go to Kennedy Space Center on a field trip.
Right.
So that really kind of lit a spark under me. And then right after that, right about that time, was the 25th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing.
Mm-hmm.
And TBS actually had a great mini series that they put out called it was based on a book called Lost Moon, but it was called Moonshot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Alan Shepard and Deke Slayton writing about the space race from the astronauts' perspective.
Cool.
Perspective. So in watching that, I fell in love with the history behind space flight. And in doing that, I kind of got into, this is what's going on now. Growing up with the shuttle program, we were seeing a launch every couple of months. And at the time I lived in Tampa, so I could see that bright dot in the sky going up, but I didn't know much about it.
Right.
So, got into it, and then I was in the Navy for a while, and I got into it even more then because submarines, which is where I was stationed, are they're an analogy for space flight. So they do a lot of studies on submariners and people going to like the South Pole to figure out, okay, this is what people react like in small groups. So very interesting if you get into the psychology of space flight.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Like a submarine is kind of like a spacecraft. Like you have to have all of your life support and air, it has to be completely sealed off to the outside, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We don't like the water coming into the people tank.
No. Yeah. And then, of course, you guys are under the ocean for what, months at a time, or what is
months at a time is about the standard. An average deployment's about 6 months, depending upon what kind of submarine you're on.
Yeah, that's cool. Talking about moonshot, I think for me, I mean, I was into space, but for me, the thing that hooked me into the history of it was, have you ever seen the series When We Left Earth?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Isn't that a great series?
Wonderful series.
Yeah.
I like that. And the Tom Hanks series, From the Earth to the Moon, absolutely outstanding.
Oh, I've never heard of it. I love Tom Hanks.
Man. Oh, and that's a 12-part miniseries. Each mission gets its own episode.
What is it? What is it called? It's Tom.
From the Earth to the Moon.
Is that the one on HBO?
Yeah, that was an HBO miniseries.
Oh, okay. Yeah, From the Earth to the Moon.
Sounds like that. I would like that a lot.
It says it's
or Gump imitation.
It says it's streaming on HBO now if you've got a subscription, and it's
absolutely
available to rent on YouTube, Amazon Prime. Okay, yeah, so I'll definitely be watching that.
It's out there, and that was Tom Hanks and Gary Sinise working together on that, because Gary Sinise is also really big into the military and spaceflight as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm totally down. I'll be watching that. So viewers, you're looking at Matthew's Twitter page here, so go ahead and give him a follow. He's doing great work with us, and he'll be posting his articles there. Obviously, we'll be posting them at Next Horizons Twitter. That's at Next Horizons _. Well, anything else you want to add about like your history or why or what? Well, here, how about this? How do you feel about where we are and like where we're going? Where do you think we're going with space? You've been following it a long time, so you got to have some opinions on that, right?
Oh yeah, I really do have opinions. Probably a good thing, but also a bad thing. But I think we're going in the right direction as a society. I think we've been moving slow for a great many years, and space doesn't get the kind of funding that it needs to receive to really flourish. I mean, the United States spends a lot on space flight compared to any other country, but it's only like 0.5% of our national budget every year.
I think it's like 0.49 of 1 penny. Like it's less than half of a penny.
Yeah,
out of every
exactly.
Tax dollar.
Now, that's not to say it's a small amount of money. It's billions of dollars every year.
I think they're up to like 20 or 21 billion for the next.
Yeah,
next
and the addition of Space Force is going to increase that. Like we're going to start getting DoD money going into space flight, and I think that's just something that's really positive. Or at least it can be positive. It depends on how they decide to use the Space Force. Yeah. But beyond that, I think we're going in the right directions. We should have already been on Mars, but we have, Elon saying he wants to retire on Mars. Every company that he has started since he made that declaration has been about getting to Mars. Even Tesla is about going to Mars.
Absolutely.
Starlink is about going to Mars. Neuralink, which is the next step after Starlink, that's about going to Mars too. That's about securing the funding to actually be able to spend $30 billion on a mission, which is about what it should cost.
Yeah. And then the Boring Company is going to give us our shelter and habitat. you know, go into the
Absolutely.
ground, because that's where we're going to have to be, is underground, you know,
Oh
to
yeah.
start, until we really figure out radiation shielding, you know. Like the first Martian settlers are going to have to live underground, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I see them living underground. I see them growing a lot of their own vegetation,
Hmm.
and that's going to take some time. But the Martian atmosphere is perfect for that because it's CO2, which is what
Plants,
plants eat.
yeah.
You can grow potatoes. I saw a movie.
That was a great movie, by the way. And Andy Weir was spot on with a lot of his stuff because he actually talked to several scientists from JPL who are designing the stuff that's going to go to Mars.
Yeah.
So he was spot on. The same thing with Artemis. If you haven't read the follow-up book to The Martian, he wrote a second book called Artemis, which is about companies on the moon,
Hmm.
and it's a great book. It's a different type of storytelling, but it's also a great book, and shout out to Andy for actually like telling the future, because then they named the first space mission or the next moon missions the Artemis program.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I have wondered if that had anything to do with it. I haven't read the book. I'm waiting for the movie, y'all.
Well, I mean, it makes sense because Artemis in Greek mythology, Artemis is actually the sister of Apollo.
Hmm. Yeah, the twin sister, right? They're like,
Twin sister and goddess of the hunt.
yeah. Well, you know, you already brought up the Space Force, and that was something that was announced this week, and I was I was going to see if you could tell our listeners what it is while this encouraging music plays in the background.
I love the music. I love all of their documentations thus far. Space Force currently has one member, and that's the general who runs it, and that is the only member of the Space
Oh,
Force
really?
as of now. Yes, currently, but they're talking within 18 months they're going to pull about 16,000 civilian and military personnel from the Air Force, from Air Force Space Command, and that's going to be the core group that comprises the Space Force in the future. So it's pretty good stuff. I think space, like I said, they're gonna get funding, and that's like, to me, that's the most exciting prospect of Space Force.
Yeah.
But
Here, I'll mute that.
they have a fairly broad mission directorate that I think they could use in positive ways. Putting weapons in space is absolutely illegal per the international space law that was laid down in 1967.
Right. But now, doesn't that just specifically say weapons of mass destruction? Like a
It
pistol
actually
isn't
it actually calls out specifically nuclear weapons.
right. Like you
Now,
can have a
the
pistol in
Russians
space.
Russians have carried pistols with them from the very beginning because they were scared of ET.
Right.
But and I don't know if the United States has, but I'm sure they had some kind of form of defense, and I'm sure that there have been other weaponizations of space.
We just had
like
really big sticks.
really big sticks, all right. When the Corona program happened, Russia was actually saying, this is the weaponization of space, and there was a big deal at the UN at the time when Corona happened. But we should push those boundaries, honestly.
Well, I think at this point we're kind of catching up. I mean, granted, I'm sure there's lots of programs that we don't know about, but I know that there's a lot of talk about, Russia and China trying to get a leg up on space technology, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they will steal anything they can,
Yeah.
and honestly, if you have the chutzpah to steal it, go ahead. But when it comes to actually weaponizing space, the United States, let's not like say we're like the
We're all
pacifists
good,
in
yeah.
space, because we've tested anti-satellite technology, or what they call ASAT,
and
we've
then gotten
tested
mad
that.
at others for doing the same.
and then we get mad at others for doing the same thing. Granted, the way we tested was probably a little bit safer for like those orbital trajectories, because that's the biggest thing that we get angry about when they test these things. Like when China ran their last ASAT test in 2006, I believe it was.
Yeah.
When they ran that test, they created like 300,000 pieces of space garbage.
Mm-hmm. And do you happen to remember like how much of it came? Because I know that whenever they do those sorts of, like when India did theirs recently, it was like, well, this percentage of it is going to come down relatively quickly.
Oh yeah, the estimates after the Chinese ASAT test was something like 90% had fallen out of space after the test, but for that, and it was like within a year. That 90% fell out, but those orbits are still unusable,
Right,
because of the amount of, there's still little bits and pieces, and that gets in. Maybe Space Force can do something about that, because right now we have tracking technologies to track these little bits and pieces, but only things down to about an inch.
Mm-hmm.
But in what was it, 1984 or 5, Challenger actually got hit by a piece of space debris. It was 2 millimeters, and it was a chip. It was a chip of paint, and it put a crack in the windshield.
Right, I remember that. Okay, yeah, I've seen the picture of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a disturbing image.
Yeah, if that would hit anywhere else on the ship that's not as strong as a window.
No, it would put a hole in anything else if it had hit it. They were lucky it hit it where it did.
Let's see. I was trying to pull up a picture of it because I know that I've seen it. Chip window, chip window on this. No, that's on the space station. Tiny debris chip. Well, there's a picture of it on the space station. Yeah, it can happen. Like, because anything you can see with your eyes, if it's in orbit, it's going really fast, and if it's not in the same orbit with you, then it's going insanely fast in relation
to you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And there's thoughts of this what they call a Kessler syndrome. If you saw the movie Gravity, that's a Kessler syndrome event where one satellite gets destroyed and it destroys another one, it destroys another one, and eventually it could take down a space station.
Right. Yeah. And, that obviously it was dramatized in that movie, but it could happen. I think that they have a pretty good handle on like what's up there right now, but if something got destroyed, and it was all happening in real time, it would take them a while to get a handle on exactly where it is and where the danger is.
Oh, absolutely. It would take some time. NORAD would do, NORAD is pretty much in charge of tracking all that stuff, and they do a really good job. The space station actually has rockets on board to maneuver up and down to move its orbit in case there is debris coming. So, because they don't like anything to come within like half a mile, basically.
I wonder how many things are in the same altitude with the space station. I guess, orbits can be elliptical, so anything can cross your path at any time, really.
Yes, but the space station it's at a relatively low orbit. It's only 150 miles.
Is it? Yeah.
It's a relatively low orbit compared to like your like a GPS satellites are at about 400 miles. So it's even lower than those kinds of things.
Space station altitude. Give it to me. 254 miles.
Oh, I was off. Sorry.
That's okay.
254. That's a relatively low.
Yeah, it's considered low Earth orbit.
Yeah, well, anything up until geostationary is considered low Earth orbit.
Oh, really? Isn't there a
there is a medium
or medium? Medium Earth orbit,
and it's usually used by like Russia uses it a lot for their satellites that they want to keep over Russia for the majority of their orbit.
Oh, okay.
So then it whips around the backside of the planet that's not over Russia, and then it's available again within 30 minutes or 60 minutes or however long.
Right. Yeah, it has it's perigee.
It's perigee.
No, it's apogee. Sorry, it's apogee is way high, but it's over like on the north side of the Earth.
Yes.
And then it comes in real close and whips around and comes. Okay, gotcha. Do you happen to know? Are there any other like Space Force equivalents in other countries that are specifically space? I mean, obviously they have their own Air Force, but like we're not the first to do this, are we? Or
we're the first to have a military branch that is dedicated specifically to space.
Do you think the others will follow?
Yeah. typically what happens in America, it winds its way around the world, especially when it comes to military stuff and technology stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
I wouldn't be surprised if Russia had a space force by 2022,
yeah.
and China probably about the same time frame.
They can just kind of speak it into existence, right? Like they don't have to
Oh
go
yeah,
through the whole process. Like we
yeah.
do.
The process, especially in China. I mean, if the leader says do this, then it's done.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with Russia.
Man, I'm a bit of an idealist, and I want space to kind of remain this peaceful environment, where because
It's not going to remain
such a
peaceful for
hard
long.
it's such a hard place to exist. It's like we need to be able to work together in space. It's kind of funny because, we work with the Russians on the space station, but we have all these other beefs with them in other parts of not, interaction, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I would say that is purely a function of the fact that the scientists work as scientists and they depoliticize themselves for those programs.
mm-hmm.
And with the space station, I mean, the Russians put not as much money as the United States, but they're the second largest stakeholder in the space station.
Right.
So they have just as much riding on the space station as we do when it comes to their personnel are up there. That's how we get there right now, and they did a lot of the launching and
it's the same way. It's like, we could be having a conflict with some other country, but me personally, I don't have an issue. Like I don't have a problem with anybody in China. I just
exactly.
don't. But the government and the powers that be, they have their issues, and I'm sure that the scientists. It's apparent when anytime you see any, like sometimes on NASA TV they'll do live footage of the astronauts and stuff, and you can tell that the Americans and the Russians and whoever else, Canadians, Japanese, they all get along just fine, and to them they don't think at all about any of the politics that are going on the ground.
No, because if one thing happens to one person up there, it's going to happen to everybody up there, and that's not a good place for that to happen.
So do you think maybe once we do get to the moon, and it's debatable of whether or not that'll happen in 2024, but once we get there and we get established, you think there'll be like disputes over like property, like mining property,
actually I don't think there will be those disputes if there is. Okay, so let's go back to,
or is it just going to be everybody just like, hey, we'll stay on this side of the moon and you stay over there, and it's going to take so long for us to meet that it won't even matter?
Essentially, they're going to be able to control the zone around their stuff that they have up there. But in general, the moon is what's called a commons in international law, which means it belongs to everybody equally. Even, poor kid in Zambia owns part of the moon because it belongs to everybody.
Right.
And that's kind of what the Outer Space Treaty is built on. So no single entity, whether it's a country or a business as of now, can claim any celestial object as theirs. They would have to allow access.
Yeah.
I'm sure
that's per the Outer Space Treaty.
I'm sure all countries will obey to that one day.
Well, I think that there's talk, like if you follow like some of the more like the podcasts that get like into the weeds. I don't know if you ever listened to the Space Show. It's this podcast that's been going on since before there were podcasts. It was just a radio show, but they'll get totally into the weeds on this kind of stuff. And there's an attorney, a space law attorney. His name is Michael Listener, and he talks about that, how there's a rewrite coming. Like at some point we're going to have to rewrite the laws and make it where corporations can own celestial bodies. Otherwise they'll have no security that they can go out, grab an asteroid, start mining it, and then actually treat it as their own, and have
profit from it.
Yeah, and have the faith that if someone tries to take it from them, that they actually hold a stake, and that the authorities, well, now the Space Force, will actually act on their part or on their behalf to defend them and their property claim, right?
Well, I mean, it was a while back ago. I actually did an article about this, and one of the reasons why a lot of these countries are fighting to get to the moon is because of the resources on the moon.
Right.
There's gold on the moon. There's titanium on the moon. There's the helium-3. I think helium-3 is probably the biggest one because helium-3 can power a whole city with just like, what was it, like 20 pounds of the stuff for like an entire year. It's ridiculous, and the price of it is like, what was it, a couple $1 million or something like that. It's crazy
because it's so rare here, right?
Exactly.
And that was one of the things. I don't know that my Google Foo could find it fast enough, but Jim Bridenstine appeared on a Fox News show, and he was asked, like, why, like, we've been to the moon, and why do we need to go do that again? And because this was like a money type show, and he said, well, look, you're a money guy, like the first trillionaire is going to be made in space because they're going to find resources that are very difficult to find here. And he pointed out that all the craters on the moon, those are from asteroid impacts and comet impacts and stuff. And on the Earth, we have that too, and we call them rare earth minerals. They're just really hard to find.
Platinum does not come on Earth. It does not naturally exist here. It comes from asteroids. It comes from space. That is the stuff that planets are made out of.
Right. And all those craters, there's a rock in the middle of that crater under the ground that if you just find it, it's still intact because the moon isn't subject to erosion and wind and rain and stuff that moves things around and makes them harder to find. Like, you can spot a crater on the moon, no problem. You ever looked at the moon with some binoculars? You don't even need a telescope. Look at the moon with some binoculars. You can see the craters. And then, like, the dude just completely flipped. He's like, yeah, you're right. I don't know why anybody's scrutinizing this plan to go back to the moon. Because that's what it's going to be. They're going to, once we get there. The moon. Huh? Go ahead.
It's not just the moon. It's also asteroids. And this was the thing that really kind of ticked me off about, like, Congress during the last term of President Obama, is that they took a lot of the teeth out of what was then called just the Orion program, where we were supposed to do a landing on an asteroid.
Oh, no, it was
Orion 3.
Not Orion. It was the asteroid redirect mission. Asteroid
redirect was going to be the fourth mission. That's actually just what they call a mission type of an asteroid redirect, and that was going to be the fourth mission of the Orion program.
Okay, so they were going to use Orion. Gotcha.
Yes, they were going to use Orion. They were going to land on an asteroid. Then they were going to do ARM, asteroid redirect mission, and actually bring an asteroid. And essentially, they were going to have it orbit around the moon.
Right.
They were looking for like a kilometer-sized asteroid. Now, here's an interesting fact: a standard asteroid, which would be called an S-type asteroid, orbiting the sun, about a kilometer wide, so a very average asteroid. That thing is worth about $2 trillion just in the rare earth minerals that you can find, not to negate the fact that you could actually use the mass from the asteroid as like a mass driver and use the asteroid itself as fuel for these longer missions.
Right.
Yep.
But will Bruce will go land on there and split it in half with a nuclear bomb?
Bruce? No, Aerosmith's going to land on it, and they're going to rock so hard that it just breaks into pieces.
I know, right?
Don't want to close my eyes.
Don't want to fall asleep.
'Cause I miss you, babe.
Don't want to miss a thing.
Oh,
Sorry.
man, I was waiting for Matt or Kegel to finish this out. Come on, guys.
And then I was just going to say Bruce Willis is going to shoot at it with his shotgun because he found out the asteroid was sleeping with his daughter.
Oh, man. Thinking deep.
I don't know how that works.
My leg!
Well, let's see. Let's move on to this week's stuff, because this was, like, we were talking about having you on this week. It was like, well, we got plenty to talk about.
Oh, yeah, it was a crazy week in spaceflight, man.
Yeah, so Starliner launched.
It did.
Yep. I've got the picture. I showed this last week, but this is a picture of Starliner sitting on top of Atlas V. Of course, last week we were talking about it. It was the night before launch, right?
Yeah.
And super excited about it, talking about where we're going to go and take pictures and all that stuff. And the assumption is, and when you see enough launches, it's like the assumption is that everything's going to go perfectly. SpaceX did their Dragon DM-1 mission back in March, and I think the only hiccup they had was the first time they attempted to dock, something was going wrong, so they had to back up and try again the next day. Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you kind of just assume, these people have been working on this spacecraft for so long that everything's going to go swimmingly. So, we all get out there and, we're watching, watch the launch, and it's beautiful. I was alone except for this Canadian dude that happened to stroll up about 30 minutes before launch. He's like, "Am I in the right place?" I'm like, "Absolutely. It's as good a place as any, because it's too late now to get anywhere else." I was down at Laurie Wilson in Cocoa Beach. I'll show you. I don't know. I guess all of y'all have seen it. Maybe, I don't know if Matt did, but that was one of the shots that I got. I set up both my cameras, and we got we got a little bit of the twilight effect, but it wasn't quite as spectacular as that last Atlas V one, the AEH F5.
That's what I was expecting to happen.
And I think this would be a good opportunity to explain why it didn't do the thing as much. So they were actually flying a shallow trajectory. Atlas V was not like typically, all launches go up and then they arc over, and to the common observer, they all pretty much look the same. But on this one, they were arching over sooner and flying a little closer to, not parallel with the ground, but a little closer to parallel with the ground. They took a lot more time climbing out of the atmosphere. Reason being, they were flying as if they had astronauts on board, and they're trying to give the astronauts a smoother flight and not have the crazy G loads.
And not just a smoother flight, but also that allows them to have up to 400 separate abort attempts if they needed them. There's like 400 places they could land along the path that they were taking.
Right. Yeah. So it keeps them in the atmosphere longer. And what gives us that beautiful, that huge, like plume expanding display is the fact that the rocket has made it up out of the atmosphere. And so the part we were watching, once the rocket got up into the sunlight, and you could start to see that kind of like free expansion, like almost like there was almost nothing holding it back, but there was just enough atmosphere to keep it kind of contained. And it was because they were still in the atmosphere longer in this flight than they normally would be. And so, I had built it up, and I kind of like after the fact, I was like, oh man, I was reminded of how many people like at work and outside of work and people that I'd spoken to, like, this is one you don't want to miss because it's going to do this thing. It is going to be insane. The plume is going to grow and just take up like most of the sky. And then it didn't do that. But
it was still an awesome morning.
It was still beautiful and everything. But I immediately started thinking about like Gary at work, and I'm like, Gary, you got to get up for this one, or Bruce.
Did he actually wake up?
No, Gary didn't. He was sick, and he said straight up he's not doing it. But Bruce said he was. Anyway, there was other people, and I was like, yeah, sorry, I didn't take into account the fact that they're going to take longer to get out of the atmosphere, like they did. And honestly, I'm only kind of learning this in hindsight, like I knew that they were doing a different trajectory, but that wouldn't have played into my predictive ability of what the launch is going to look like. You know what I mean?
I think that one of the programmers on the computer had the same problem.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, tell us about that. What happened next?
So after the burnout of the Centaur upper stage,
Wait, I thought the
Atlas.
Centaur failed.
No, the Centaur did not fail.
I should totally pull that up. Keep going, but I want to pull up.
Yeah, exactly. So the Centaur And the Atlas rocket performed perfectly. You come to expect this from the Atlas rockets. They've had like 12 years with no incidents and hundreds of launches of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tried and true system. It's just like when the Soyuz had a failure. What was that, like last year, this year, where
It
the
was
Soyuz had a
October of
failure?
last year, yeah.
Yeah, October of last year. So when the Soyuz had that failure, it was like mind blown because that system hadn't had a failure in years. Years. The Soyuz is the most like trusted launch system on the planet
Right.
for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
because it's been in operation since the 60s. But so the Centaur burns out. It releases the Starliner capsule, and the Starliner thinks, okay, what's next? And then it starts going through a list. Okay, I need to do this at this time, this at this time. The launch mission, the elapsed mission timer,
Mission
the
elapsed,
EMT,
yeah.
that guy, the mission elapsed timer, was not, the automation wasn't programmed precisely for that. This is just speculation on my part, but I think it'll prove to be correct. Is what happened is that the person who was actually programming the automation, because it is programmed automation, that person was programming it for a traditional launch trajectory. So that 30-degree turn up, not this long trajectory. With that 30-degree upturn and that big bloom like you like to see, you're in space in like less than 8 minutes. Whereas with the new one, this shallow, or what they called a flatter trajectory, it took 15 minutes to get to space.
Right.
So I think that difference in time is what ended up happening. So the computer looks at the elapsed mission timer, and it says, all right, I've already done my orbital burn. So now I'm in the orbit I'm supposed to be in. I'm going to start trying to maintain that orbit. So it starts burning prop or propellant. I know Bridenstine said prop quite a few times. So it's propellant. So it's burning this propellant, trying to keep itself in an orbit that it's not in. And by the time they were able to actually communicate with it, it burned so much of that prop that they were not able to actually do the correct orbit insertion burn.
Well,
so
in Harry Stranger just pointed out in the chat that in the news, or the press conference, they said it was off by 11 hours. And what I think and I wish I could remember what this is based on, because I've listened to several podcasts that have talked about Starliner this week, and they mentioned that, you know, with a typical launch, the mission elapsed timers just starts at T0 and there's no other clock to even look at. But when you have the Starliner on there, it needs to have abort capabilities while it's sitting on the pad. So one of the mission elapsed timers is going to start earlier, perhaps 11 hours earlier, right?
Well, I mean, they wouldn't need to use those abort capabilities 11 hours early. I think it was purely just a programming error. Astronauts don't actually get on board the Starliner itself into the capsule until 4 hours before launch.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to make sense out of this 11 hours thing, because they did say because one of the reporters asked, how far off was it? And then the guy just said point blank 11 hours. And that was like,
see, I didn't hear that part.
They got 11 hours. And some of the people that I've heard, some of the people I've heard speculating about it, they're like, right before separation, Starliner probably reaches down into Atlas. And I think maybe even Boeing or maybe Tori Bruno mentioned this too. It reaches down into the Atlas computers to verify the clock that it should be on right before separation. It grabs that value, and then separation happens, and it rolls with that, right? And so it thought that it was further along in the mission, all the little check marks that it's got to do, all the different things. But what I'm confused about is it started doing this thing where it was trying to hold this very precise attitude and was using up its RCS thruster fuel. Right? Like that was one of the things that Scott Manley pointed out early on, before NASA had even really started, because they went dark on NASA TV and they weren't putting it but Scott Manley put out a tweet where he had done a screen capture and it showed that Starliner, that's RCS thrusters, were just burning like crazy, like trying to hold this ultra precise attitude. Right? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I saw that, and I mentioned that I know for a fact just by the way that Manley made that tweet that he definitely has played Kerbal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's how he
because
got
he's like,
famous.
yeah, it's 90 to prograde right now. It's
Yeah.
90 to prograde. I'm like, holy crap, he's right,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't look like that.
No. Right.
So yeah, it burned up a lot of prop. It wasn't able to make the ISS.
And they actually used the RCS thrusters to make orbit, right? They didn't use I don't know what the engines are called, the orbital insertion engines that are on the bottom, the service module for the Starliner. It didn't use those. They used RCS fuel to get the rest of the way into orbit, right?
Oh yes, that is exactly how they did it, and because once they knew they weren't going to be able to get to the ISS, they were like, how can we get this the safest, the quickest? And the safest, quickest way at that point was going to be just burn the RCS to get it into a stable orbit so it can stay up for it stayed up for 33 orbits. So get it up there so it can maintain a stable orbit. And like Bridenstine said, if there had been astronauts on board, they would have gone to the ISS because the issue would have been caught. And they can override. There's actually a switch that just says override.
Yeah.
It's up on
Just
the left-hand side.
turn off the automation.
There.
Yeah, they said they've got like different tiers of automation. They can switch them off, but they can go all the way down to where they're actually flying the spacecraft, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's what would have happened if there had been astronauts on board. They are trained for that. So it just goes to show, first off, if this was like an aborted launch and it ended up like that, the astronauts would have been safe. That was essentially a test of a safe abort of a launch.
Yeah.
And they still accomplished every mission goal except for docking with the ISS.
Right. I actually really appreciate that they use the RCS thrusters to get into orbit, because I've done very similar things in Kerbal before. Like not using my main engines, just using RCS to do something. Like I've coming back from Minmus or something. It's like I'm still at escape velocity and I need, I'm out of fuel, but I still got some monopropellant. So I end up just using that to try to trim a little bit. And then I try to dive into the atmosphere and I end up doing like 10 orbits where my perigee goes a little bit into the atmosphere, slows me down, and just gradually brings me in, but I'm out of fuel.
Oh yeah, aerobraking. That's actually how they have accomplished several of the Martian landings of the rovers, is using aerobraking.
Right. Yeah, what was the one in the last year or so that that was their thing. They
Insight.
Was it
Is that Insight?
No, I think Insight went straight in, like, right?
Yeah. Well, Insight was the last Mars mission.
But there was one where it's actually an orbiter. It's a Mars orbiter that they were using aerobraking to slow themselves down and lower their apogee until it was low enough, and then they finally did one last burn to bring their perigee back up out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember. Maybe ExoMars, or I don't know. Has ExoMars flown? I don't remember.
Yeah, ExoMars has flown.
Maybe
ExoMars did use that technique. Several of the different Martian orbiters, including the Indian Martian orbiter, the Mangalyaan, used the aerobraking to slow themselves down once they got to Mars.
Right.
I wonder if whatever team or person that messed up the clock resigned like the CEO did.
Well, the CEO had bigger problems than just the failure of Starliner to dock with the ISS.
Yeah, do you think that was already going to happen, like the ousting of the CEO before? Like, I don't think Starliner was the nail in the coffin. I think he was probably already on his way.
I don't think it was the nail in the coffin. I think he was already on his way out. I just hope that his golden parachute tested sat.
Well, so what do you think? Do you think they're going to go ahead and put people on the next one?
I think if Jim Bridenstine is pushing the way I hope he's pushing, that they'll put a crew on the next Starliner mission. I don't see a reason for I mean, the ISS docking is it's not a simple procedure, but it's simpler than getting into orbit.
Yeah, it's something we've done for a long time.
Oh yes,
And
we
if
have.
the automation starts to fail, then the astronauts can. I mean, that's probably something they train on a lot.
Oh
Is the
yeah,
actual docking, and as long as it's not your RCS thrusters and stuff that are failing, which they seem to be working just fine. And that was another thing that they were able to test inadvertently because of all this is they started to see some of the limits, and they mention where they had actually like expanded the limits of what they would allow the RCS thrusters to do because they ended up burning them longer and putting more heat stress on them and stuff like that.
Oh yes, they got a lot more test data from those RCSs because they were used in such a strange and out of the ordinary way than they would normally be used. And I think Bridenstine even said it was either Bridenstine or the CEO, not CEO, but the president of Boeing Space was saying they actually they used all the fuel out of one of the RCSs, which they had never expected to do. So that was going to give them extra data and training for the personnel on the ground on how to actually reload one of these things once it's completely expended.
Like on orbit, they can reload it?
Not on orbit once it got back. But I mean, eventually we're going to need to have the technology to reload and refuel on orbit. And if we get new data, then we get new data, and that just goes into that developmental phase.
Yeah, I think. Well, my assumption on what they'll do is that they'll go ahead and put people on there. I also think that there's going to be there'll be a group of people that are upset about that, especially if they let them fly people before SpaceX does. It seems like with that kind of earns SpaceX the ability, as long as in-flight abort goes well, it kind of earns SpaceX the ability to fly first.
Yeah, I would completely agree that SpaceX has they have outdone themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They were given roughly what 2/3 of the amount of money that
It was
Boeing was given to do the exact same thing.
It was like SpaceX got like 2.4 billion and Boeing got like 4.6 billion.
Yeah.
And then apparently, which came out, I don't know, like a month ago, Boeing was paid a little bit more supposedly to keep them in the game.
Yeah, there was that.
Do you know anything about that?
They were given an extra. I can't remember the exact amount. It was in the hundreds of millions, though. They were given an extra hundreds of millions as an incentive to continue developing the Starliner. So it was kind of like hey, we really want you to do this from the U.S. government. Now,
I wonder how Dream.
Another interesting thing, ULA and Boeing work hand in hand all the time.
Oh yeah,
and it's just because ULA is comprised of like Lockheed and all these other what Zubrin calls. Sorry, I really read a lot of this guy.
Oh yeah, I'm all about some Zubrin.
Yeah, Zubrin's the stuff, but he calls them the dinosaurs. Now SpaceX is this new kid on the block. They've only been around since 2001 or 2, and they are doing stuff the dinosaurs never imagined anyone could do.
Yeah.
They're reusing their rockets. Come on, no one ever thought to do that before. Rockets were designed based off of ballistic missiles. You don't go out and collect your spent shell casings.
Right.
Well, normal people don't go out and collect spent shell casings. Mm-hmm. So why would you go out and collect these rockets to use them again? And that's why launch was so expensive for so long.
Oh yeah, I remember like the whole thing leading up to it. I was following them before they ever landed one, and the criticism was, you'll never make it work. You'll never be able to land one. And then when they finally landed one, it became, you'll never make it cost effective. And
they've done that.
And they've done it apparently because, like, they don't release their numbers. They're a private company, so that they don't have to release that information. But what we've seen about SpaceX and how they operate. If it wasn't working, they would move on. They would move on to something else. You know, if they weren't saving money by reusing their rockets, they would be doing something else.
Elon is he's a mad genius, and he's done some incredible stuff. And the stuff he's done with SpaceX.
My Christmas present.
Yeah, look at that.
Father Elon.
Here, keep it up there. I'm going to click on you. Yeah. That's awesome. All right.
My girlfriend Emily made that for me. Well, framed it.
Framed it for you.
She framed it for you. I need to find out where she got that, or if that's hand painted.
It was on Reddit somewhere.
I'm totally gonna buy myself one of those.
Okay, so we've got the launch, and of course, you know, all this stuff happened with the computer and stuff, but they did land successfly.
They did, and that's
all three parachutes opened.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it was a glorious sight.
Yeah, they didn't forget to attach the one.
Oh God.
Yeah, I don't know. This is an easy jab. Sorry. But yeah, I'm just showing pictures. If you're out there in YouTube land, these are the pictures posted by NASA of the actual landing, and yeah, man, it sucks that it was tainted by the clock thing. You know, like you really hope for these things to go smoothly. You know, as an advocate, I just don't. I know that the public. Oh yeah, I was going to show that video. I know that the public, when they see something bad, they may not understand all the inner workings of it, and how, you know, we don't rely on emotion, we rely on data to help us make decisions about things in the future. And I want to play this example of this. I don't want to call him a buffoon, but I kind of just did. Talking about this stuff. And this guy was in the press conference room and listening to the exact same information the rest of us were. And
passenger rocket, the Starliner, into space just moments ago. And David Curley is at Cape Canaveral with all the details on this. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Cecilia. A big test for Boeing underway now, trying to be the first American company to carry Americans back into space in nearly a decade. It is called the Starliner, on top of an Atlas V that just blasted off from here at Cape Canaveral at Kennedy Space Center, headed to the International Space Station. It's unmanned, but inside is an anthropometric test device, a dummy known as Rosie the Riveter, with more than a dozen sensors to measure the forces astronauts will face. Boeing is racing with SpaceX. It is planning to dock with the space station tomorrow morning. Guys?
Oh, wait, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong video.
That's
not the one.
Okay. That just adds to it, though.
Oh, here we go.
Mr. Curley, come on, bro.
This one's like 3 minutes long. Anyway, he says that it was the Centaur upper stage that failed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I really want to hear that.
Oh, you want to hear? Okay, cool. Well,
yeah, I want to hear that. I haven't had.
This is
at
the right.
Kennedy Space Center today, a Starliner capsule built by Boeing went off course after a successful launch, apparently due to an engine problem. So our David Curley is in Cape Canaveral with the latest there. David, if you can just explain to us what exactly went wrong.
Well, Kimberly, this was the final test for the Starliner, a very important test to carry humans back to space from American soil. So launch was fine. The booster got it up to where it needed to be. Then the second stage, which is called a Centaur rocket, is supposed to get it into orbit. And the best example I can use is when you're making an off-ramp off of a freeway, you want to be at the right speed and the right angle to make that turn. Well, the problem with the Centaur rocket was it didn't fire because they were listening to, or the computer was actually looking at the wrong clock. So everything was automated.
This is
and it
wrong.
was supposed to happen at a certain time. But
here's the interesting thing.
The Centaur did not.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my wife watched that, and she is not into space stuff. She's a musician, and a teacher, so she's not really into space stuff. Mm-hmm. She gets what info she gets from me. She watched that video, and she's like, "Oh, okay, that sounds about right. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds like half right,
It
maybe.
sounds right to the layperson that doesn't pay that much attention, and
Yeah,
that's what
it's going to
pisses me
sound
off.
right. It pisses me off too because it puts the blame on ULA and not on Boeing.
Exactly.
Yep.
And when it really comes down to it, and I talked about it in my article, that it will introduce a loss of faith in the product that Boeing is putting to market versus what ULA is putting to market. Like if you introduce that loss of faith, the consumer is ultimately going to decide not to go with ULA for launches when ULA is one of the best out there, as opposed to saying, oh, Boeing's at fault, so that's where I need to put the blame. If you put the blame on ULA, that's going to have an effect on their stock.
Yeah, and now, granted, any payload creator, satellite or whatever, they're going to know the difference, and they'll do their homework. But what I think what it points out is that ABC didn't even have like a space guy go down there. Like,
yeah,
this guy
I
had
don't know what else this guy's been in.
He obviously has no prior knowledge about what's going on with the space stuff. You'd think that a big company like ABC would have like their person. They may not be assigned to space stuff all the time, but they have somebody that at least follows this stuff and can kind of parse what's going on and be able to deliver it. Just deliver some facts. To get that so wrong.
I think there's like a rumor reporters there, and they're like, all right, draw these straws. Who gets the short gets to go to Florida.
Right. Yeah, it's what it seems like. Yeah.
Yeah, they were trying to get home for Christmas.
Yeah.
That's what it was. He wanted to finish his reporting and get home for Christmas, and that's what it is. And I understand the rush to be the first to report something, but if you're going to rush to be the first to report something, make sure you have your damn facts right.
Right.
You probably read it on Twitter.
I mean, he was in the room. I'm pretty sure that guy even got a question in on during the press briefing.
Oh, well, absolutely. He has ABC after his name. He's gonna get a question in.
Right. It's just so listeners out there, you don't necessarily have to subscribe to nexthorizonsspaceflight.com. You can, but go with if you want to know about space stuff. If you're watching this show, you are probably already tied in on Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. But if you're not already, make sure that whatever you're following with space, for some reason, the big media companies don't really get it right, and follow one of the smaller outlets that actually specializes in this stuff.
If they have space in the title, they probably specialize enough to suit your needs.
Right. Yeah. Now, another one that I can say that I trust that isn't just space would be Florida Today, because I know Emery Kelly. He's a great reporter. He lives this stuff. They're actually a subsidiary of USA Today, but they're great. They follow this stuff very closely. Emery Kelly, especially, he knows this stuff. But you got NASA Spaceflight, you got Spaceflight Now, you got Next Horizons Spaceflight. We live right down the road.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know about going to any of the big news outlets for your space news. They just don't get it right. They
don't get it right. They're trying to get it out because there's all these other stuff that's in the news that they have to report. So they want quick and dirty and done.
Yeah, and dirty especially. They were probably jumping for joy when something was going wrong, because that would
then that gave
clicks.
them more airtime.
Yeah. So that's unfortunate, but I don't know. Let's see. You mentioned that if we got you talking about Mars, you could go. So what do you want to talk about Mars? We have a Mars window coming up next year.
Yes,
for anyone that doesn't know, the Mars launch windows only come around every 26 months because Earth is a little bit closer to the sun, so we go around the sun faster. Mars is a little further away; it goes around a little slower. A Martian year is how long? Do you remember?
Gosh,
I can probably Google it too. Let's see.
want to say 3 years to R1 or something like
It's
that.
like a year and a half or something. 687 days. So that's like almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
But of course, it's 26 months for a window because as we're going around the sun, Mars is moving forward. So it takes us 26 months to catch back up with Mars.
Yes, and that's for the quickest window.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you can go
launch
anytime.
it anytime, but you're limited by your fuel. If you've played Kerbal, you know how big of a limiter they call that the gold standard in limits, because you have to have fuel to lift the launcher, and you have to have fuel to lift the payload, and then the payload has its own fuel, but it only has enough to do a certain amount of delta V.
Right.
And once it's gone, there's no more.
There's no more. Yeah. There's the fuel to lift the fuel to lift the fuel to lift the fuel that actually lifts the spacecraft. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's why rockets are so big with a tiny little spacecraft on top.
Absolutely.
So,
the majority of the rocket gets trashed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you most excited about with Mars right now?
With Mars right now, I am excited about Mars 2020. That's going to be launching in, I think the current estimate's July, which is at the beginning of that Mars window.
Okay.
Mars 2020 is going to do some really cool stuff. It's going to be the first drill ever actually landed on Mars. It's looking for the climatology of Mars and actually trying to further characterize that, because we only know what we can learn from the instruments we send.
Right.
And we don't have all that data. So as more data comes in, we get a better picture of the planet. And Mars is very fascinating.
And Mars 2020 is very similar to Curiosity.
Yes, it's actually based off of the same vehicle as Curiosity, which is about the size of like a minivan, and it's using the same power system as Curiosity used, and it's essentially the same. What in the space industry they call it a bus. It's the same bus as Curiosity, which is good because Curiosity was a great little vehicle and it lasted forever.
Look at this. I think this provides really good frame of reference for how big it is. Look how, like these guys, they're standing right next to the wheels. There's just pretty big wheels. The head on that arm is, I mean, I've followed the Curiosity rover for a while, and like this video is really helping me understand how big that head is on that arm, man.
Oh yeah.
It's so much fun to drive.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's like a ton, right? The rover itself, just the rover is like a ton, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Let me pull up my infos here. Overview. Click.
Me and my boy's name is on that rover.
I think I've got it too. I think I did.
Oh, did you do
I
it?
think so. I did it for Insight. I think I did it for Mars 2020, which I'm anxious to see what the name's going to be. There's a lot of people that are like there's like the space Twitter community that announced about a month ago that they had been accepted to be a part of the
judge.
the judges. Yeah, so they're just like reading essays from school kids, and they'll choose the name based on those essays.
I am happy to report the Next Horizons Spaceflight name is on that rover as well.
So if any aliens come across it, millions of years from now,
right? They're like, what is this?
3 million
Yeah.
names. Like, hey,
Right? Who's
It's
this
like a
geek?
hit list.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh, they're long dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's got a cool countdown here. I guess it's probably counting down to like the first day of July because they don't have an exact launch date. I don't think yet.
Who's it? flying?
On the official website here, they have launch window is from July 17th to August 5th.
Oh, that's kind of short, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, as they get closer to the launch, they'll cut that window down, and I'd say probably within the next 3 months they'll have an exact date and time already scheduled.
I mean, I'm sure they'll get it launched in that window, but it just seems like when you've only got an opportunity every 26 months, like that's only like what 2 weeks there. Yeah,
roughly. Yeah,
that's only 2 weeks, man. It's launching on what, an Atlas V?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I thought it was it's going to launch with the 5 with the extra the one extra block booster.
The extra, like, solid.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's going to be the ULA with the one solid booster.
oh, with one solid. Oh, wow, they can. That's impressive. They're going all the way to Mars with this rover. With what is that? That'd be the 511 configuration.
I think, yeah, 511.
It's a 5-meter fairing, and then one booster and one RL10. No, wait, is it RL10? Whatever the upper stage is.
I see. Harry is talking about the Mars helicopter. Well, the thing about the Mars helicopter is it's a really cool concept, and that they have built it yet. There's just not a ton of information on that. Like when it's launching. What?
Well, it's launching with Mars 2020.
Oh,
it's
it
on board? Yeah, that's. I can't wait for that. And now, I don't think their expectations are that it's gonna like last. Stephanie said one of y'all need a job at ABC. Thanks.
Thanks, bro.
I think they're not expecting the helicopter to last all that long. It's kind of like a trial thing, like that. It's like the first time they've done it. But it's going to have the ability to get up, fly around, scout out areas and stuff, and get a higher resolution than what we can get with the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I'm going to say I apologize because I have not been following the Mars helicopter. So, my bad, Harry.
It's pretty cool.
So,
yeah, it's pretty sweet that I'm so glad that they're even trying it. Like because it seems like it came in kind of at the last minute. Like I think it was only like this year that they really made it public that they're actually going to include it.
It's like, oh yeah, we're going to put a helicopter on.
It's got little tennis balls for feet.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull up a picture of it.
Yeah, I have not been following the helicopter at all.
Oh yeah,
that might be.
It's a quick little video of it. I don't think NASA's gonna mind us sharing that.
They like music, not a lot of talking.
Yeah. There it is. Oh, look at the little tennis ball feet. Man, those blades have to spin so fast because what's the Martian atmosphere? It's like 1% of Earth atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things SpaceX was actually getting out of landing their boosters was they were getting the data in the upper atmosphere of how their rocket engines work in what would be essentially a Martian atmosphere.
I remember that, yeah, because there's like infrared footage that like NASA was in cahoots with that because they were interested in the same thing. It was that supersonic retropropulsion in a Martian-like atmosphere, and so there was like that upper portion of our own atmosphere that's really, really thin.
Yep.
So yeah,
I like this mission just because with the Mars 2020, I like it just because it completely revolves around life on Mars and preparing for humans to go there.
Yeah.
And that just it excites me.
Yeah.
I mean, best estimates are right now that humans might walk on Mars sometime in the 2030s. I think we could make that faster if we didn't put NASA in charge of it, personally.
Well, NASA's hand may be forced if SpaceX is successful with the Starship. Because if they make a vehicle that is capable of getting there, you better believe NASA wants to be on board.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean?
And that will force their hand.
Yeah, yeah.
For a while there, I was kind of subscribing to Zubrin's idea of having essentially what he called a Carl Sagan Prize. That was this prize program that would award incremental steps towards going to Mars. Anything from being able to launch and return a vehicle like SpaceX does to actually landing humans on Mars. And it included prize money for his program, at least that he had designed, included prize money for the astronauts themselves. They would come back and be essentially millionaires.
Oh, well, I'm down with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot riskier than going to the moon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My wife once asked me, "Would you want to go to Mars?" I'm like, "No, I'll go to the moon because that's only a few days away. I'm not going to Mars. I get bored too easy."
I would have to, even with like the chance that I might regret that decision. I acknowledge that it's possible that 6 months into the journey you might be like, "What am I doing?" And then you finally get that. You step out of the spaceship. You're like, "Oh no, I've made a great mistake."
It's a long ways back.
I've made a great
And
error.
honestly, when they send the first humans to Mars, they need to stay for longer than just like 30 days, which is kind of what NASA's goal would be, like a 30-day stay time and then head back.
Oh, so
like,
you can, so you're still within that window where you can get back to Earth fairly
yeah,
quickly.
so you would still be within that
the home and transfer, right?
Yeah, that home and transfer window. Yeah, home and transfer.
Home and
HOH, man.
HOH, man.
And for everybody listening on Friday the 3rd, we do have a launch coming up. You can count on us to be covering it. Probably Steve-O's going to have, cameras at the pad. Probably Keegan will be there at the press site.
I think it's the 4th.
Possibly.
Isn't it the 4th?
It's
because the UTC
It's the night
time.
of the 3rd.
The UTC
night
time
of the 3rd,
is the
yeah.
4th. That keeps throwing me off. Yes, that's right. Yeah, another Starlink launch.
That's right.
And
60 new satellites.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And they've already got the media accreditation applications out for 3. So we've got number 2 coming up, and then number 3 and 4 are also out. So they're just judging based off like when they send those out and when they actually launch. They're hoping for 3 in January, I think.
Yes, their current plan is 1 a week. Now, if they're able to actually keep that cadence, good on them. They want to be able to complete the entire Starlink within the next year and a half.
They better start catching those fairings.
Yeah, they do need to catch the fairings.
Got to catch those fairings.
They keep getting real close, but
I think that's the big thing right now. Because they've reused them out of the water, but I bet there's a lot more work that goes into getting them ready once they get in the water. And
yeah, that's what I also found interesting about when Starliner landed. It landed on land. It was the first pod style capsule like that that the United States has ever landed on land.
Mm-hmm.
The Soyuz land on land in Kazakhstan,
right?
And that's simply because it's very expensive for them to get over to the Pacific. They don't really have the infrastructure to go out there and grab them. So they came up with the idea of landing on land. But SpaceX is going to be landing in the water. From the beginning, they designed Crew Dragon to actually land on land, and it can do so, but they've kind of been led by NASA toward landing in the water, and it makes it more expensive because anything the seawater touches has to be removed and replaced.
Yeah.
They're planning on 26 Starlink missions.
Oh yeah, it was every other week. Sorry, I misspoke earlier.
Yeah, 26. And 26. Then the in-flight abort is we're still on for the 11th, as far as we know.
So far,
yeah.
Yeah, let's keep that time, SpaceX, if y'all are watching this.
Yeah.
That time. That's almost
and that'll be their last test before they're planning on, Elon, he likes to give really tight schedules and then they just grow with the size of the project, but he's talking February.
Yeah. And they did just put out, I've got the tweet up here, that they completed their 10th successful multi-shoot test in a row. That in a row is a big deal because they said they needed to do 10 in a row in order to get it certified. Now, they also, or Jim Bridenstine said, the data has to all be consistent or whatever. And, you can't just see a picture of Dragon under 4 parachutes and just assume that everything's good. They're going to go through, look at the data, make sure that everything's consistent. And if they need more tests, they'll do them, but it's looking really good for their parachute system.
Absolutely, and that's the last big piece of the puzzle for crewed flight for SpaceX is getting that parachute system perfect.
Yeah,
as close to perfect as you can get in spaceflight.
Right. So yeah, man, we've got a great. Oh, you know what we should do? Leading out. Let's see. I'm actually gonna pull up a notepad here. Okay, we're gonna go 2020 predictions for pressing for flight. Okay, so I'm gonna go Matt Cutshall. What do you got? You can as many as you want, but give me at least one.
Predictions for
what's just some prediction for next year that you think, and then next year when we get around to New Year's, we'll look over these and see who's right.
Let's see. NASA accreditation.
Okay, all right.
NASA credentials is the main goal right now
for NHS. Okay. Anything that's like mission related, like I don't know.
No, I mean I'm pretty excited about Mars 2020 launch, but as far as predictions go, catch me when I've had more rest.
Okay. All right, we'll go Matt Jordan. You got any predictions for next year?
Oh yeah, I definitely got some predictions for next year. I think SpaceX is going to fly the first U.S. astronauts from U.S. soil to the International Space Station. Probably Q1, might slip to Q2, but it's definitely going to happen in the first half of the year. I think they're going to beat Starliner. I think that with all of the ruckus having at Boeing, that they're going to lose sight of their goals, and things are going to slip. But I think they will end up doing it, but it's going to be pretty much directly after SpaceX. For Starlink, I think they're going to get probably 15 to 20 of those missions off the ground on time during the year of 2020.
All right.
And Mars 2020 is going to be a badass.
All right, Mars 2020, badass. Okay. All right. Kegel, what do you got?
Hopefully see a Starship not blow up and actually hover around.
Okay, Starship going orbital or just suborbital?
I'm going to say it's going to be suborbital. I think it's a big project, and it's not going to be as quick as Elon wants it to be.
Yeah, I can get on board with that.
There's been a whole new type of ship.
What do you think? You think astronauts fly next year?
Yeah, I'd say so.
On what?
SpaceX.
You think just Dragon or both?
No, I'm sure both. But for SpaceX will be first.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with all that.
Yeah, I'll say astronauts fly. And Dragon first. Let's see. I mean, I feel like I play it safe. I do think Mars 2020 will launch. I got one. What's the one that Europe is working on where they're having the issues with the parachutes? Do you remember what that one's called?
Mm-mm.
All right. Well, I just put Europeans Mars thing won't launch. Not because I'm rooting for them not to, but that's because it's pretty late in the game for them to be having issues with their parachutes.
I would agree with that.
And let's see. I'm going to say SpaceX has 30 plus launches. Matt, Cutshaw, do you want to throw any more in there?
I'm gonna agree with you on the 30 plus launches.
All right.
I know for sure, probably 30. I'm gonna see your 30 and raise you 5.
Okay, so you're going 35 plus. Okay.
And I have one we haven't mentioned yet, but I think we have our first space tourists happen this year.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, I like that one.
And I think it's going to be Virgin gets there before Blue Origin does.
Yep. I mean, here we go. Blue Origin actually has a launch besides New Shepard.
Next year?
No, I don't know about next year.
What do you think about New Glenn?
Yeah.
You think New Glenn's going to fly next year?
No.
Maybe, possibly.
Let's go. I'll put you down for it.
Let's just put it down there just to be, because you never. Okay. Here's my deal. Yes, I am wearing a Blue Origin hat, but that has nothing to do with what I'm about to say.
Okay.
I think because Bezos he's just extremely underrated right now. I can say that personally, doing some stuff and seeing some stuff with my own 2 eyeballs.
Mhm.
I think everybody's extremely underestimating them. They're
the new SpaceX on the block.
Yeah.
Man,
They're about to be. Right now.
Due to his signing an NDA, I cannot say much, but I'm just gonna say that everybody's underestimating Blue Origin, and they're gonna come through with some stuff. I mean, look how fast they're building right now.
Yep.
Look how fast they're building.
Yeah, they're building stuff fast, and they're working on the lunar lander as well.
Yeah, I mean, he has the money.
Yeah.
He has the money to accomplish whatever he wants. You know what I mean? He's just,
money
he's
opens
literally
doors,
a billionaire.
Man. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Pumping $1 billion in a year.
Yeah, I've seen some things, man. I've seen some things.
What do you guys think about Moon Express?
I think they go bankrupt.
Yeah.
You think they go bankrupt?
Yeah.
Weren't they supposed to fly on Rocket Lab?
Yeah, they're supposed to. Yeah.
Was it Rocket Lab they were flying on?
Yes.
I mean, I know they like, they demolished the old pad where they're supposed to be doing some tests and stuff. But since then, have they done anything?
No, they haven't.
I
was pulling for him too.
I've been
met
pulling
the CEO.
for him.
He was a cool guy. Like I enjoyed meeting him. He was at a symposium on space flight from Florida, and he was touting how many thousands of jobs he was bringing to the Space Coast and all these things. And he was saying all the right stuff, but when it comes down to it, do you actually produce those results?
Right.
Oh, here's a good one. Firefly actually has a launch this year.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I think Firefly is finally going to get their launch.
Wish there was season 2 of Firefly.
Firefly, yep. I think Firefly is going to get a launch, maybe even Revitility, and they might get a launch as well. Rocket Lab will launch from Wallops.
Oh yeah, Rocket Lab. Okay.
Yep. Rocket Lab is definitely going to launch from Wallops. I'm actually planning on, maybe if we can make this work, the goal is to go to Virginia this year to see a launch.
I want to see Rocket Lab. It'd be awesome if we could be there first.
That'd be pretty cool. Kerbal Space Program 2 comes out this year.
Well, that's a pretty good because it's already announced that it's supposed to, but
oh yeah,
it may not.
Kerbal just the same thing with rocket stuff. Things get delayed.
Exactly. All right, we got some pretty good predictions here. It's been a great show, everybody. Appreciate the chat. You guys
tune in next year to see if any of those come true.
Oh wait, Harry Stranger says ExoMars. I don't know when you said that, Harry. I don't know if that was pertaining to the previous conversation or. Oh, I bet he was trying to answer which.
Yeah, that was the ExoMars is the name of the European. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because earlier we talked about ExoMars being the one that did the aerobraking thing, but I think that was wrong. But anyway, it's been a great show, Matt. Appreciate you coming on. We're gonna have you on again.
Yes, sir.
You're right there. any old time we need you, I'm pretty sure we'll be calling on you.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, you're good, man. I like that. I like that you follow this stuff and you're just as excited as we are. So we'll probably be inviting you on more. Yeah, so everybody in the chat watching live, appreciate you being there. Everyone watching after the fact, hey, we appreciate you too. Hit that subscribe button so you know, and hit the bell so you know when we're going live and you can actually be in the chat with us. Kegel, play us out.
Shutdown sequence initiated. Shutting down.